Om Shanti. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to honouring life and facing the effects of the loss of a loved one. My name is Carolyn and I am here with you this afternoon as your MC. If you wish to have Hindi translation, please press the globe button. And for Tamil, the separate Zoom link, please. Thank you. So this topic is one that challenges all of us at some time in our lives. And at no time has it been more relevant to all of us than it is at this moment in time, locally and all around the world. The programme consists of 3 segments, and there will be the opportunity to ask questions at the end of each segment. So please put your questions in the chat. If you are on Zoom, please address them to Brahma Kumaris UK only. Thank you. We are joined by 2 special speakers this afternoon who will engage in conversation and share from their personal experiences and their spiritual beliefs. Thank you so much for being with us today. Sister Jayanti, who is the European Director of the Brahma Kumaris, and Deacon Sutton, who is the Head of Chaplaincy at Loughborough University and a Methodist minister. So thank you. We've called this first segment Doing, and we're looking at the impact of not being able to perform the usual rituals and that you follow during a death. So how can we help ourselves when we have not been able to attend a funeral or go through the normal rituals? And we've missed out on this important step in honouring the lives of our loved ones. Can I pass to you first of all, Sister Jayanti, to start this conversation? Thank you.
Om Shanti, a greeting of peace to my sisters and my brothers, and also good evening. And it's a joy to be with you again, Carolyn and Jan. I've known Carolyn for decades, and Jan over the last some years since we keep meeting in Leicester regularly. And what I'd like to share is the fact that although there have been times when physically we haven't been able to be present due to travel restrictions, COVID restrictions, gatherings, all of this have changed completely. But yet there's been a very powerful element that has come into our lives, and that is being able to have a celebration of a life through online gatherings. And the advantage of this, where I've been, is that because London is strategically placed geographically between the New World, the USA, Canada, the Caribbean, and India, whatever time we've organized in London or the UK has meant that it's been very convenient to both sides. And so people across the Atlantic, but also people across the oceans in India have been able to link up with us. And so we've carried out simple ceremonies. The few people who have been actually physically present have been there, but the other ceremonies have been carried out just simply through our presence online. Is that something that's similar to your experience, Jan?
Hello, Sister Jayanti. Yes, it is quite similar for me. And could I just begin by saying, for those of you who are joining us today who may be newly bereaved, please accept my sincere condolences. As Sister Jayanti said, for us, it has been very similar, with limited numbers in crematoriums and church services, which have been very different, because we usually, as part of our ritual, part of the service is singing together, and we have not been able to sing. I can remember in the early days, last March, I had to officiate at a funeral where there were only 10 people present. And I looked out to what is usually a full congregation to just see people sitting singly on their own, without even that close support of their loved ones being next to them, and knowing that they would not be able to go back and have a funeral supper with those who they would usually share with, you know. And in sharing that funeral supper, once the service is over, that is usually a time where you can share together and talk about the loved one who has died. So that was missing. Everything was done virtually, as it was for yourselves. And people over the months did find different ways of engaging, live streaming, and even sharing together following the service, where they could then talk about their loved ones, and even sharing food virtually, so that they were doing everything they would do in person, but in a virtual world.
Also, we were fortunate that there were windows of time when places of worship were open in London, and I'm sure across the UK also. And so when that happened, then because we were able to have gatherings, because we were able to maintain social distance within our place of worship, we were able to invite the family, very close members of the family, a small group, to have what we call an offering. And what that meant was that, as in every tradition, food plays quite a major role in everything, because it is a powerful way of bonding together. And so we would prepare a special meal and have that as an offering to God, together with the family, knowing that our thoughts of love and that comfort of sharing food is also the vibrations of that are being transmitted to the one that has gone away. And the bereaved members are there feeling the presence of that being. And so that began to happen fairly soon after June. I think it was sometime in June that lockdown first opened again. And then in between, we've had periods where, again, there's been lockdown. But people waited, and then after the opening of places of worship, then again, they began to join in. And also what we found was that having a gathering physically was also, as you said, very important, apart from the virtual connection at the time of the cremation or just pre-cremation. What we found was that when people would sit together physically in a meditation room, that would give them a lot of support and comfort. The other thing, of course, was that when we heard of anybody passing away and their family asked us to remember them in our prayers and meditations, we would make an announcement about that in the morning class, because we have a class online every day. And so when we had our meditations, our morning class is spiritual study, but it's also time for silence together. And so during the period of silence, just prior to that, we would mention the people who had been asking to be remembered in this way. And so virtually at that point, people would then send out those vibrations of love in God's remembrance. One is where I remember a person, but the other is where I'm in remembrance of God, but then I share God's light and love with that individual. So I know that that brought a lot of solace to the people who were bereaved, but also, yes, I'm sure those vibrations reached the departed spirit also. So I'm sure there's things that are similar that happen within your tradition too.
Yes, within the Christian tradition and the reading of scripture, and scripture is usually, there are parts of scripture that are quite common to use for funeral services, and the book of Psalms is something that we will often guide bereaved friends and colleagues to, for comfort, and to also, the psalmist spoke about real life events and real life feelings and how they felt at that time, and the comfort through the scriptures was also a comfort of knowing where their loved one had now is, if they're not here physically on earth.
Right. Yes, it's a big question. Where does the soul go? What happens to the soul? And I know all of us believe that the soul is eternal. There's no question about that. The dust of the body returns to dust. The elements mix with the elements of nature around us. But the spirit is something which is different to matter. And so I think all of us share the belief that the spirit is eternal. And so our thoughts and feelings can reach the spirit even after departure. And yes, then at that point, then there are many different avenues to explore as to where the soul goes. But again, one thing that connects the theistic religions is where we know that if a person has had that love for God, that connection with God, or even if there hasn't been that, but there's been a life based on truth, a life based on honesty and high principles, then surely that soul must be with God somewhere, wherever, but must be present in that feeling and must be experiencing the company of the divine and the love and light that the divine is able to give. So then when that question about where, when that has been resolved, and I know for sure that the soul is with the divine being, I think that's also very comforting. It removes a lot of the questions and the waste energy and maybes and ifs and buts. And so there's a sense of stillness and calm that reaches the family.
And also today, as you are probably aware, in the Christian church, we're celebrating Pentecost Sunday, which is seen as the church's birth, as when church began, and it fulfilled the promise from God the Father, God the Son, that the Holy Spirit would be here with us to comfort us always. So within our faith, we have got that firm assurance that the Holy Spirit is surrounding us and comforting us as we take each step on the journey of grief.
And it's interesting that it's during this period of COVID that people have very consciously turned to God. I'm told that they've been Googling God to find out more about God. They've been wanting to understand more deeply what is prayer, what is meditation. And so I know that on an individual level, when there is something like a bereavement that happens, then especially when it's unexpected, in the sense that when my parent is in the 90s, like when my father was ready to leave, he was ready and we were ready to let go. But my mother left quite suddenly, and she left many years before him. And so when there's a sudden departure, then at that moment, you really need extra help. And so people have really been searching to find out more about God, about prayer, about meditation, because COVID didn't have any boundaries of age. There were young ones who went, seniors who went, all along the line. And so I think that that desire to find out more has been a very powerful, motivating experience for many.
And I would agree again with, we as chaplains on the university campus, we have found many more members of staff and students have been asking us those searching questions. And I think some of that, even if they haven't personally experienced death is now spoken about in everyday terms, whereas here in England, we have always had quite, death has been hidden. It's been hidden away, you know, it's not been brought into that sharp focus. And now more and more from whatever age are asking about their own mortality. They have suddenly realised that, you know, we don't just lose people who are much older, who have suffered with illness for a long time, that mortality, your own mortality, is brought into sharp focus, and how the fragility of that, of your mortality.
Yes, it's true. Otherwise, we tend to put the subject of death behind locked doors. It was never a subject that was openly discussed. And even the subject of God, very rarely in the Western world has it been a subject of focus. But I think that with this situation, I'm sure that more and more people are comfortable and ready to talk about not just death, but also the role of God and the personal relationship that one can experience with the divine. So that's also come back again into our lives, where we had put it off to the edges, to the perimeter. Now it's coming back again.
Yes, it is. On campus, we've got a team of 13 chaplains from many of the world faiths, and each month they will send a report to me of the different things that they have been doing that month. And throughout the pandemic, the questioning and the talking about God is much more in the forefront. It has given them all opportunity to share their own faith journey and what that means to them, particularly as we're going through such a traumatic time with the pandemic.
It's amazing to know of this, and I'm very appreciative that you've shared this, because so many people are concerned about the young people today. What are they thinking? What are they doing? What are their values? How are they preparing for the future? And of course, the legacy we're leaving them with is not such a pleasant one, with climate change and the repercussions of that. But the fact that young people themselves are now asking questions about life and death and the divine, for me, that's a very good sign. It's part of the silver lining that always comes with every cloud. And so on the one side, the grief, but on the other side, a signal towards something which belongs to another dimension, which is also very much part of life, the spiritual aspect of life, which has been ignored for quite a long time. And so I think that that's an important thing that you've just shared now. I really feel that that's been very important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan and Sister Jayanti. We have one question for you so far. Why do we have so much fear of death?
Is the question to me or to Jan? To
you
both.
Can start first to both of you, yes.
Jan, you first.
Thank you. I think there is so much fear because, as we both shared earlier, it has been hidden. So it's not talked about, it's not understood. The media often portray death as something to be afraid of, something that is going to happen to you that is going to cause a lot of pain, and it does cause pain, but I think the more open we are in talking about death, it's better for society. If this isn't something that is just behind closed doors and seen as a very sorrowful time, which it is, you know, the loss of a loved one at whatever age, under whatever circumstance, is the cost of loving, that we hurt so much when we lose someone we love. But there's also the hope and the joys that come out of that, and the way that we have still got the riches of that person's life within us to carry on within our life and share those riches as we grow, as we you know, grow from children to adults, and just nurture the richness that life has brought to us and has meant to us.
Thank you. Sister Jayanti, if you could answer briefly and then lead us into a meditation, that would be lovely. Thank you.
I was going to say that there's always fear of the unknown. And while we haven't addressed the whole subject of death and made it a part of life, which it is, life and death go together. And so now that we're beginning to open up the subject, as you said, Jan, it's becoming clearer that it's not an end, it's a transition. It's a journey in which the soul is moving on. And I think the more people can realize this, the easier it becomes to deal with that subject. Otherwise, death is seen as a final end, the door is shut and never again. But it's not like that, it's a transition, there's another phase. And so the more we begin to explore spirit and spirituality and these existential subjects, I think the less we're afraid, we understand what it is we're dealing with. So I think that we are moving in that direction.
Thank you. If you could guide us now in a brief meditation, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Sure. Just sitting comfortably where you are. You can either let your eyes rest on the image of that point that you see in front of you, or you can close your eyes, whatever is more comfortable for you. And I'll share a few thoughts and we can move together on that inner journey in silence. For a few moments, I decide to go inside. The world outside is left behind, and I explore what's going on in my mind. And having been exposed to ideas of the spirit for the last period of time, I'm more ready to enter this world. I focus on the center of the forehead, and I go deeper and deeper within myself. And I come to that space in which I find myself, a point of light, a light that radiates peace. This is who I am, the eternal being of light. Om, I am Shanti, peace. And in this awareness of peace, I feel the presence of the divine, the being of light, the source of love, of truth, of purity and peace. And as the power of love reaches me, the love begins to heal the soul. And I am comforted. And in the remembrance of the divine, I send those wishes of pure love and God's light to my loved one, so that the soul is able to receive these to guide them on their journey. Holding the awareness of the divine, my thoughts come back to the physical dimension and the awareness of the moment here and now. I hold this love within my heart. Om Shanti.
Thank you. That was beautiful. In the case of a sudden or unexpected death, we often go through that doing phase in shock or in a state of unreality. And then afterwards, the feelings begin to come in, and they can be overwhelming and feelings that we've never felt before. And so our second segment is about feelings. Can I ask you both to share from your experiences and touch on whether within grief there are any right or wrong feelings and how we can process those feelings? Jan, can I ask you to open up this conversation, please?
Thank you. There are no rights and wrongs. The feelings that we feel can be very individual to ourselves, and feelings, there are a lot of common feelings that most of us will feel even within an hour of each other, not even days. You know, there's feelings and emotions of sorrow, of sadness, of guilt, of wonder, of isolation, and particularly this last 14 months, I think the feeling of isolation for people has been more at the forefront. And these feelings will come and go, and they come and go without anything particular triggering them off. One moment you may be feeling as okay as you can be, and feeling that today I've even managed to smile. And then within the hour, you can be sitting and the tears will come. And you just don't know in yourself what has triggered these different emotions. There could be feelings of anger at the one that you have lost, because you're now there facing this and facing. I can remember when a very close friend of mine, her husband just died suddenly. He woke up one morning and said, "I'll go make us a cup of tea in a minute, Duck." And the next minute he died. And the first thought my friend had, and then came the guilt, because she felt angry with him. She says, "How dare he die and just leave me on my own within minutes of, and not expecting that." And then followed the other emotions, not even in turn, they just came in waves and went again in waves. Is there anything you'd like to say at this time, Sister Jayanti?
Yes, I agree completely. And I've experienced something similar myself last year when Daddy Jayanti passed away, because I'd known her since I was 8 years old. And so I'd been with her for 60 years or plus, 60 plus years. And then it was expected that she would be leaving, but you were never really prepared for that final moment. And so it was waves of different feelings that would come, and I would take God's help at that time. So yes, I relate completely to what you're saying. And for the people who are watching us today, there may or may not be such a strong person in their life who had supported them in the way that I had been. But yes, of course, when there's an intimate relationship or a close one with my children, parents have seen children go, children have seen young parents go. And so all these feelings do come. And as you said, they come and it's okay. So not to feel bad about any of this, but there is one special thread that I think can help everyone at this moment. And that is to know that our thoughts reach the soul that has departed. And if I can send them God's light, that's going to help them and me. So I'm going to remember them, of course, but let me hold them in God's light. And so that will be comforting for me and comforting for them also. And I think that that's been a very helpful thing for me to understand, that not only is it that I'm not alone, but I have God with me. And I hope that those who have this faith will find their faith strengthened as they hear these words, but also confirmation that, yes, this is the way to go. But for those who've not had this experience of that deep faith, I hope that they'll explore these ideas and find out more within their own tradition, whichever that may be. But our traditions are there to give us support, especially at these moments. And so I hope they'll turn to someone who can guide them further on the journey to strengthen their faith, because their faith in God will help them overcome those feelings of isolation and loneliness, which are very, very real. But they can also lead to a state of depression, which is not a very easy situation to deal with for the rest of the family also. And so let me be aware that I can bring God into the picture and take God's help. But also, it's not just help for me, it creates a stable atmosphere in the home so that there's a pillar of strength that others in the family can also draw upon. But also we're serving, we're helping the one we love who's on another journey. Our thoughts travel beyond all boundaries of space and reach them wherever it is they are.
Yes, as you was talking about God's light, and a symbol within Christianity is to see Jesus as, you know, the light of Christ. And I can remember I first came across this when I was training for ministry at Queen's College, where we would light a candle at the beginning of prayer or at the beginning of a time of silence and a time of remembrance. But we never extinguished the candle at the end of the prayer time or meditation time. We would always send the light to someone who we felt that light needed that light at that time. And you know, just as you was talking, it came back to me that we can do that within our home. And we've been asked many times during the pandemic to actually put a light on our doorstep to remember And if we put a light within our home, within safety, away from children and everything, but that light, we all know that when we light a candle, the light just doesn't stay in a confined space. The light reaches out, and those thoughts just came to me as you were speaking.
It's very beautiful how that image of light has been a symbol for God's love, for God's presence, God's peace in all the different traditions. It's just an interesting connection of how close the human family is. Sometimes we think more about the things that separate us, but in fact, that symbol of the light, the candle, is a beautiful symbol that brings us all together to the remembrance of the one supreme. I'm also very aware that this period is one in which one has to learn to stabilize oneself, because the emotions go up and down in many directions. And so the one thing that I can hold on to is God's company. That really is the one stable force. Maybe there'll be some members of my family who can be with me. Maybe they can't. Maybe there'll be others who reach out to me by phone, but it'll be a few minutes, a few moments, and all of that is precious and valuable. But what I can learn to do is to keep God with me through my remembrance. And if the ritual of lighting a candle is something that's helpful for me, I can do that. In India, they have an earthenware lamp in which they put in, it's a homemade thing. And so you make some dough and you put in a wick within that and you light that. And it lasts for many, many hours. But and what you're supposed to do is to keep that light burning day and night for 13 days, because somewhere people believe that within that period of 13 days, the soul is most vulnerable and is open to many, many different energies. And so the prayers that we have, the system, again, in all traditions of not just prayer at that time of the cremation or the funeral, but to continue with some type of prayer and meditation for a period of time after the loss of the dear one, is a very important time of mourning. We're helping the departed spirit with that light, the flame, the remembrance, but we're also helping ourselves by taking that support of the divine, which is available to us and which under normal circumstances we wouldn't. We'd get on with our lives and say, you know, we've got too many things to do. But in this case, nobody will say, do this, do that, do the other. It'll be a period in which people will respect the time that you're grieving, the time that you're in mourning, and they'll support you. And if you say what you want to silence, they'll help you with that. If you say what you'd like to have is a reading from the scriptures every evening, with whether it's now online or a few of the family members, they'll support you in that also. It's a time in which the family feeling is one of giving each other mutual support, which is very beautiful. And so I think that that's something that is a tradition in all the faiths, but it's a very important thing to keep alive. And I know that some traditions and rituals are said to be old-fashioned and superstitious and all of that. I'm not going to bother with those. But some of these traditions have a very deep-rooted significance that's connected with real life. And so not only is it that the departed soul is vulnerable, but we are vulnerable. And so prayer, meditation, the connection with God and the support for each other is a very important period.
Yes. Yes, and also during this time, for Christians and for your community as well, the places where we normally gather together have been closed. And a lot of people, although they're not grieving the loss of a loved one physically, they're grieving the loss of that gathering place.
Yeah.
And it is finding how we can actually gather corporately in the times when we need each other rather than physically. And people have done some amazing things throughout lockdowns in keeping in contact with one another and keeping that corporate worship alive and well. And in some areas, it has grown. People who may not walk through a church door or walk through your door will put on a screen where they can feel that they're either anonymous or they're part of a larger gathering. And you know, so although today we are focusing on the death of loved ones and the death of those close to us, it's also time to reflect on the different separations that we have had. And I think for many, that corporate gathering of their faith families is also has been a time of grieving. And it's how do we now move forward to start coming back into being together again when so many people are still anxious of starting to meet with people again. So we, you know, there has been days when I know all of the things that will help me when I'm feeling low and feeling lonely and feeling down. But there've been days throughout this pandemic when I've struggled to see that light of Christ in the situation. And in those times, I think what has brought me back into a place of peace and hope is knowing that that faith community around us are there praying for me and praying for each other. And that has been a real source of strength throughout this, particularly this last 14 months.
London has been fortunate in that there's only been, since June, when we were able to open again after the first lockdown, there have been, I think, 2 periods when we couldn't open our doors. And one was just prior to Diwali. And I think the government and the local council were very aware that it was a special time and many people would want to come together, and would people remember to have social distance? It was all of those things that led to them to say, just a few days before Diwali, sorry, places of worship have to close. And so we did. And it was very interesting because we found that we were able to open through the day for individuals. I think that was the factor. You couldn't have gatherings, but you could have individuals coming for prayer. And it was very beautiful because people gave their times and they were able to come, say, at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever it was. And we had somebody sit in reception to greet them with a smile and to have this eye contact, that eyes carry all our feelings and emotions. And we have a method of eyes open meditation also, but there would be somebody to acknowledge them, greet them with a smile, and social distance was maintained. But that sense of community continued even through that period. And then after Diwali, we were able to open again. And through Christmas, I think we were able to stay open, but again, with restrictions of numbers and so on. But again, on January, I've forgotten which date, but we have a major festival on the 18th of January. And just a few days before, and this time it wasn't that the government knew that this was a special day, because this is a day in which we honor Brahma Baba very specifically within the Brahma Kumaris community. But somehow that was a day, again, that it was announced a few days prior that the doors have to be shut except through the day. You couldn't have gatherings. And again, we thought, well, maybe many of us would have been tempted to all come together and there wouldn't have been space. So, okay, it's the regulation we have to follow. Okay, let's accept it with dignity and grace and peace. But again, people were coming through the day. And so it's been, for me, very, very heartwarming to see how people have actually missed coming to a place of worship. And they've been waiting for the doors to open. And of course, until now, we couldn't have travel between cities. And now that's opened up. And so we had a few guests that came from outside of London, and they had tears when they sat with us and chatted with us. It was very moving to see how much they were appreciative of the atmosphere and the community. And so love for God and love from God is a very special experience. But when we begin to experience God's love, we also feel the connection of the human family. And so the faith community is a very, very special part of everything in our life. And so you're absolutely right, Jan. Some have been grieving for that also, but I think that, touch wood, things are opening up, and maybe that also will be possible in a big way, not just where there's a big space, but wherever there's a need.
Thank you both. There's now quite a few questions come in. We will answer as many as we can. But the first one, Sister Jayanti, if I can put this to you, how to deal with unresolved grief from many, many years ago, please.
Let me wind back my memory tape, and can I see where it began? And if I can identify a particular situation where it started, and maybe it's so long ago in the midst of time that it was in infancy, so I don't even remember the situation, but maybe I've been told about it. I'm thinking about a child that was asked to or put in the care of grandparents, for example. I know that with many of our community being immigrants, some have had this experience of being put in the care of their grandparents while their parents made a life for themselves here, and then the parents went back and brought the child back. But that initial gap from age 2, 3, 4, for a few months or many months left an imprint in the memory of that child. And some remember it, some don't remember it, but that state of abandonment when the child is so tiny and vulnerable has a very deep imprint. And so if I can talk about it, if it's possible, let me talk it through with somebody who I trust, who can understand and support me. And probably within my family, there'll be somebody like that. But if not, let me find a counselor, a professional person who can help me with that. So talking it through and coming to the understanding that what happened in a situation like that wasn't somebody's fault. They were thinking of a good life for me, and they wanted that time to be able to create a proper home for me, the right circumstances, all those things. So if I can forgive them for what I saw as abandonment, and accept that it was a need for them, for me, for them, and maybe come to terms with them and forgive them if they're still around, especially talk to them about it, that would be a great help. So that's one particular situation I've talked about because I've seen it happen to so many. But you can translate that sort of idea, that explore, examine, and identify, and then speak about it with someone you trust, whatever that may be. And if it's just a grief that's there and I can't identify where it comes from, that also let me speak to somebody first, take that external help. And whatever help I can get on that level, fine. But the other help that I can very definitely get is to know that my connection with God is a deep, strong one, and I can reach out to God and take God's love. And God's love will heal the pain and the sorrow and will take away a lot of that grief so that I can start living my life in the way that I should today.
Thank you. Jan, there's one here that really is very specifically, I think, in your area. How have students who have been studying mainly online been supported by the chaplains when they have been dealing with illness and death in their young lives? And who will deal with the pandemic consequences for the years to come?
For the students who have been online, they have received the same support as they would do if we were physically there for them. We have opened, as everybody else has, online ways of contacting students. We've spoke to them on the phone, we've emailed. We run a bereavement cafe on the first Wednesday of each month, and the bereavement cafe has tripled in numbers in that time, but we have still been able to support each student or member of staff who have come to us and asked for that support. For the chaplains themselves, it was very difficult when you are in a presence ministry to no longer be able to be a presence in real life. And we had to look at ways, and some of those I've already mentioned, but then came the wearing of face coverings. And when your smile becomes the new hug, what do we do then? And as Sister Jayanti said earlier on, our eyes had to be then the way that we connected through screen, on campus, because some of us remained on campus for the students who were there, but your eyes are the window to your soul. That is a very old saying. I think I can remember my grandma saying that to me. Your eyes are the window to your soul. So we found ways, we listened to God, we listened to those around us as to how can we still support these young people and the members of staff as well, who are in need of support at this time. Chaplaincy is a 24/7 service. So we're not just there between the hours of 9 till 5, we're there whenever anyone would need us. And only a few weeks ago, a young student telephoned, and I answered the phone, and he said, I didn't really think there'd be somebody there at this time. And it is still just that being there and finding different ways of being and finding physical things that you can actually send to them, or give them the tools that they need and for whatever situation they're going through. And a lot of the situations that students have been facing, if they'd got somebody physically there, if they were on campus, it could be something that's resolved in minutes, but because there's nobody physically there, it kind of highlights it and makes the problem seem so much larger than if there was somebody there just to give them a hug. Yeah, I hope that helps. And what was the second part, Caroline?
I think than all of us, who will deal with the pandemic consequences for the years to come? I
think we all will.
Yes, I think so.
I think we'll all play our part in it, and I have joked with students in particular, saying, oh, you know, when you're as old as I am or a bit older, you'll be saying to your grandchildren, well, in 2020, I was a student when this pandemic was going on. And it will bring for many stories that will go on forever. And, you know, and I think the main thing that I've got to say that we have offered our students and staff throughout this is kindness and the gift of time.
Thank you. There are more questions. I'm not ignoring them. If you put your question and I haven't asked it yet, we'll get to it as soon as we can. But for now, Jan, I believe you have a poem that you'd like to share with us.
I have, and this is a poem again, which I often give to staff and students or friends of my own who are grieving, and I've had emails and cards back to say that they find it a comfort and they keep it in their purse, they keep it in their coat pocket, they keep it in the drawer beside their bed, and it's something that they can turn to if they feel they need some comfort. The poem is adapted from a passage by David Elginbrode by George MacDonald, and it is from the Northumbrian community. It is called Walking with Grief. Do not hurry as you walk with grief. It does not help the journey. Walk slowly, pause often, do not hurry as you walk with grief. Be not disturbed by the memories that come unforbidden. Swiftly forgive and let your soul speak to you unspoken words. Unfinished conversation will be resolved. Be not disturbed. Be gentle with the one who walks with grief. If it is you, be gentle with yourself. Swiftly forgive. Walk slowly. Pause often. Take time. Be gentle as you walk with grief.
That's lovely. So the third and final part of today's programme is healing. So we've looked at doing, we've looked at feeling, and now the healing. It is truly that we honour our loved ones by learning and growing through their influence on our lives and bringing into action the qualities that they showed and they brought out in us. Please, can you share with us now how to fully embrace the healing process and move forward? Sister Jayanti, can you start on this one, please?
Thank you. I like the word legacy. What is the legacy that this individual has left for me? And I emerge those powerful memories. And of course, there's memories of pain and sorrow. There's memories of guilt. There's memories of love and joy. It's a kaleidoscope of many feelings and emotions. But if I focus on the memories of joy and inspiration that I've had with that individual, then I emerge them in my mind and I go through that scene and those feelings begin to emerge again. And when I remember all of those things, then I'm left with a treasure store that's very, very precious. Moments of courage, moments of faith, moments of inspiration, and just sometimes just sharing love and joy. So this is the legacy that I have and I can treasure and keep with myself. So I think that's a very important part of the whole journey towards creating a new beginning in which now I'm no longer with that individual, but I am still with others and also, of course, with the one above.
I'm just thinking of some of the things that we do on campus to remember those from our community who have been lost to us. We're very blessed on campus to have a remembrance garden. It's a walled garden. It's very peaceful, very beautiful, very well cared for. And I often go there during the working day just to sit and just be and to look at the beauty of the garden. Within the garden, our staff and our students are able to place a plaque on the wall to remember their loved one as something physical which says who they were, where they worked, if they'd been a student, and when they lived, when they were physically here on this earth. During the year, we have a service when we place the plaque on the wall so that families gather and they're able to have a service to dedicate the plaque to their loved one. Each year, we have a remembrance service where the name of each loved one on the plaque is read out by the chaplains. Because of the pandemic, we had to actually record the service and send it out online. It reached more families. It reached those who are no longer physically able to get to the garden, even in, dare I say, normal times. Some of the loved ones have said that over the years, this has become the only place where they have heard somebody read out their loved one's name and in front of a gathering of people. We also have that place to scatter the ashes of loved ones amongst the beautiful flowers that grow in the garden. And from that, as to help with healing, the gardener will give us the seeds of the poppies, the bulbs of different flowers, and we will send them to the family so that even if they're in France, if they're in India, wherever they are, if those flowers are nurtured, they will grow. In fact, someone sent me some photographs this year to say, look, these are the plants from the university garden. They're now growing in our garden so that we have got something that is in the same place as where we scattered our son's ashes. Again, when I look at our faith community in the town, once a year, this hasn't happened for the past few years, but it happened for many years before that. A Christmas tree would be placed in the centre of town. And just before Christmas, we would hold a star service where everyone who came along who'd been bereaved would be offered a star, and they would write their loved one's name on that star. The star would remain on the tree throughout the Christmas period. And then after that time, each member of the faith community would be given a star, and they would pledge to pray for that family, even if it was the family are unknown to them, for every day for a year. And these are ways that can help with personal healing and with healings of families and faith groups, that they can physically do something to remember the person who has been lost to them. And this is another saying from my grandma. She used to say, cry until you laugh. And you cry as you remember the things that have happened throughout your loved one's life and your life together. But then one day, and you will be able to laugh. You'll be able to laugh at some of those same stories. The ones that have given you humour during their lifetime can also bring humour and and love even in death. So these are just some of the ways that I have found brings healing, but most of all, it is that legacy. It's that remembering your loved one, and there will always be a part of your loved one in you to be able to pass that legacy on and tell those stories of the person you have loved.
It's wonderful to hear all the things that you shared, Jan. One specific thing that we do every year, and it happens through the year, but there's also a specific time within the calendar where for a week it happens during that period. And that is to cook food in God's remembrance and offer it to God, but also with that awareness that those vibrations of love are going to reach the departed spirit. And so, like this morning, there were many, many anniversaries of people's loved ones who have gone in the last few years. And so we were remembering them, and they brought flowers and fruits for the offering. And the whole place looks like a garden then. It's surrounded by many flowers. But once a year, there's an offering for all departed spirits, not just me, my family, and so on, but it's a time when everybody gets together to offer to those souls. So that comes around August, September time. It's a lunar calendar, so the dates change, but it's around that time of year.
We have a similar day within our calendar, which is All Souls, and that is in November, around the remembrance time in November.
Interesting that the two timings coincide.
Yeah.
It's like Diwali and Hanukkah come together, and soon afterwards there's Christmas. So there's a synchronicity in all of these things.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you. We have several more questions. So the first one, as we appear on life with birth, why is it so difficult to accept and understand that we have to disappear?
I think because we're human beings, and so it is difficult. It will always be difficult to lose a life that you love, and for me that is why we're human. So.
Jayanti?
What happens is that when you build up a relationship of love with somebody, then there's a bond that's there. It's a bond of love, it's a bond of attachment, and it's very difficult to break. And so when that bond is suddenly cut by death, then we feel a little lost and we don't like it. It's very difficult to accept it, even if somebody has studied spirituality for a while, yet still those feelings still need to be healed. And so it's because of that bond of love and appreciation that and that departure creates a sense of loss, and it's not so easy.
There's another one here that I think follows on from that. How to deal with guilt. It was the guilt you feel when someone you love dearly dies suddenly, and we feel we did not have enough time for them when they were alive.
It's a big one, and it probably impacts most people, especially in terms of parents, because young people get so busy with the world that parents then, even when we could travel, when we could meet, maybe it became once a month or once every 3 months rather than every week or much closer. And so there is that sense, but I think that I have to first of all come to terms with it myself so that I don't feel upset and restless, and say, it happened. That was the best that I could understand and do at that time. And so not beat myself up anymore. But now at this moment, let me give my time to the ones who need me the most. So learning a lesson from that so that I don't occupy myself with that constant activity that has been there for quite a while. So COVID came to help us slow down, to take a pause. It was a beautiful poem that you read, Jan. And it's not only for the grieving, but it's for here and now for all of us. It is important to slow down and make time for people who we do love and do value, but we don't take the time to show it to them. And so my children, my siblings, can I give time to all of that? And so I'll deal with that sense of guilt. If I make up for it, I can't do that for my parents now, but I can do that for others around me so that I don't need to carry a burden with myself.
Jan?
I must say, I just agree with everything that's just been said. We can't live our lives full of guilt, you know, so we have got to. There are times when all of us can think, well, I should have done that, I should have done this. And I've, over the years, a lot of people have shared with me, you know, I was with my loved one, but I wasn't there when they died. But there isn't, and they'll say they were alone when they died. But I don't think anybody's ever alone when they die. You know, the scripture teaches me that they're not alone. And you can just pop out of the room for a moment and somebody can take their last breath. But you can't live your life feeling guilty for that moment when you just have to give thanks for everything that you've been able to do together and be together while your loved one was with you. It is difficult, but you've got to try and find that peace within yourself that will bring you to that place of peace, or the guilt will just, it will cause negativity.
Thank you. So one here, I think you've already answered, but if the soul has found the place with God, how can I connect with the soul? How can I pray to the deceased soul, knowing that I will be heard?
My faith tells me and my experience tells me that souls do not die. And so if I want to connect, just simply to share my love and good wishes, let me do that through my prayers, my meditation. And so I'm in God's remembrance, aware of that being of light, and I bring that person in front of me, but I let God's light reach them. And after a certain period of time, maybe beyond a year, a little bit longer maybe, but I also have to stop remembering them in this way, because now I'm going to say a statement that might sound off the planet, but I believe that the soul takes another birth. There's a continuity and there's a rebirth. And I don't have physical evidence of this, but there's a lot that's been written about it. Reincarnation. I don't use the word reincarnation, but rebirth. And so I know that it is a reality. Some of my experiences also tell me that. So I know that that soul is now playing another role and has new relationships, new parents, new siblings. And I mustn't keep pulling that soul back to myself. For that period of a year or so, it's fine. But beyond that, let me have the dignity to step back and say, you have my good wishes, my love. You must continue with your life now further.
Jan, would you like to say anything on that one?
I've been asked the question before, is where are they now when somebody has died? And for me, I have got to believe if I'm walking around wearing this very visible collar, I believe that, the promise that Jesus gave to us in the Gospel of John, where he says, where I go to, I will come and take you to myself. And so for me as a Christian, I strongly believe that Jesus will take us to God. And I don't deny that there may be other ways to God for those who have not got the Christian faith. But I also strongly believe that wherever you are, that person is anyway, because their life enriches your lives. That the person is real to you and the things that you have done together. And in that way, you can still speak to the person. I know one of my close friends who died a few years ago. Well, she was she was like a sister, really. And in fact, everybody thought we were sisters. And she adored little wrens, and her name was Jenny. So we call them the little Jenny wrens. And one day I was standing at the kitchen window, and there was a little Jenny wren looking at me from the windowsill. And it's times like that that connect me to the soul of my friend. When you see a beautiful flower in the garden, when you hear the voice of a relative that you've lost through the voice of the new child that has just come into the family. I don't know whether this is how Christian ministers would speak about it, but for me personally, I feel that, and that feeling is real for me. And if that feeling is real for me and helps me to move on and live the life that I need to live in order to honour God and honour the life that has been given to me, and not get stagnated by the loss of a friend, it helps me, and it helps me to heal. So through my faith, I mean, I wouldn't get out of bed on a morning. My faith is the blood that runs through my veins. It is the heart that beats. And through that, it gives me a positive way of feeling that I am connected to those who I have loved and those who are now in the place that some might call heaven, but I know that their soul has gone on. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. I think we have just time for one more question. Why is it that we only look at the good things about a person when he or she has passed away, and not when they're still here? Can we not appreciate all now?
Very important point. Yes, I think it is something worth remembering. And we've just been celebrating a lot of birthdays in May. For some reason, there seemed to be a birthday many days of the week at the moment. And people actually have been giving thanks to that person, appreciating their qualities and remembering their goodness. And I think it's a lovely way, rather than wait till after they've gone, at least once a year, maybe more than many times once a year,
Yeah.
but at least once a year to appreciate that individual. I think, and birthdays become a good opportunity to do that, especially for the ones who are immediately around me. And so if I can recognize their goodness, appreciate that, and give them thanks for what I've taken from them, it's a really very beautiful thing to do, and not wait till after they've gone.
No, no.
Jan?
I would agree. I do try my very best, and I think this is something I've gained from Natalie, that in my emails, I always try to remember to say thank you to people for doing what they do, to thank my friends just for being my friends, you know, and just to randomly send a text or an email or a card to say, I just thought of you this moment, so I wanted to let you know. You know, and I can't even blame it on like being British, really, that we're so we're so reserved that we don't thank people enough. And I can always remember when I stood at the school gate with my boys, and I'm a people watcher, so I like watching people. And I would often see them tell their children off when they'd done something that they deemed not to be appropriate to do. But it was very rare I saw them praise them and say, you did that well. So we've got to remember to give people praise and show them that they're loved as often as we can. You know, in any way that we can. It doesn't have to be big gestures, just a tiny word, a little. One of my friends sent me a bar of chocolate through the post. Well, that is just amazing, isn't it? Because they know I love chocolate. You know, just show that appreciation, talk about the good things. But when you're saying, why do we talk about the good things? I flipped it a little bit, and when I heard you say that, I was thinking of you know, at some of the funeral services I've done, no one ever remembers if they were really cantankerous in meetings. You know, so we do focus. It is good to focus on the good, and we must remember the good, because and I'd written something down at actually the best tribute you can give in the memory of your loved one is that you continue to love one another, to be kind when you can, and to comfort each other as you walk the journey of grief, and try to be to each other what your loved one has been to you and will continue to be to you. And then we'll remember with joy in our heart all that has passed, and look forward with hope and love for everything that is yet to come.
Beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, we are running out of time, and any questions we haven't asked, we will hold on to and use again. So thank you both very much. Sister Jayanti, could you guide us on a meditation just before we close?
I want to thank Jan for sharing from her heart so beautifully. Thank you. And
Thank
Carolyn,
you.
you also for navigating us through this whole journey. And of course, all those who've been watching and listening and giving time to this, much appreciation. So yes, let's go on another journey. Going inside, coming to the light that I am. I am light. I am peace. I am a child of God. And my thoughts turn to the divine, that being of light who radiates love, compassion, truth, and joy. The one who is my eternal mother, able to give me unconditional love non-judgmental love. Love that embraces the soul and accepts the soul completely. The being who is my Father, who cares for me, protects me, and offers me an inheritance of happiness. My teacher, the one who helps me understand the secrets of action and cause and effect. My friend, the one who's always available for me, and the supreme guide, the one who leads me to my home beyond the physical dimension, to the world of light. I stay connected with the divine, and that light of truth and love reaches out across the world to the entire human family, so that all may feel peace and comfort. Holding this awareness, my thoughts come back to the physical dimension.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Thank you both for your beautiful and open and honest conversations. You've opened our eyes in ways to help ourselves and be there for others. In healing ourselves, we are truly part of healing the world. And this is an honor we have, and it's a way we have of honoring our loved ones who have passed. So thank you again, Sister Jayanti, for being with us this afternoon. And thank you, Deacon Jan Sutton, and to all of you who've shared in this journey this afternoon. So goodbye for now, and Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.